Welcome back to Grandpa's Time. I'm glad you could join me today. Hey grandkids, I'm out in the Aleutian Islands, a place called Dutch Harbor, and I thought I'd talk a little bit today about a little known piece of World War II history, the Battle of the Aleutian Islands. So thanks for joining me today. Welcome back. So today we're going to talk about the Battle of the Aleutians. I had tried to do this once already, but I've got some better notes. So the Aleutian Islands is about 1,000-mile long chain of islands that comes west off of Alaska. In June of 1942, the Japanese launched airstrikes against Dutch Harbor, where I'm at today. 42 Americans were killed, 64 injured, and 10 U.S. aircraft were lost. After the Dutch Harbor attack, the Japanese landed on Kiska and Attu Island. I'm going to show you Attu and Kiska Island here. Okay, so if you're looking at the Aleutian Islands, Dutch Harbor, that's Unalaska Island, is there. And then that's Kiska. And that's Attu. Kiska and Attu are the two islands that were actually invaded by the Japanese. The villagers of Attu Island, I think there were 45 of them, were captured and taken prisoner by the Japanese and held as POWs for the duration of the war. I think close to half of them died of tuberculosis or other disease. After the attacks and the two islands were taken, the United States evacuated all the Aleuts from, I think, 9 villages. They put them on transport ships and took them to southeast Alaska, where they were held for the duration of the war in internment camps. So I'll follow that up. I'll talk about that at the end here. But they think that the Japanese did it as a diversion to try to divert ships from the Midway attack. Another thought was that the Japanese were worried about future attacks coming from the Aleutian Islands. The battle, when they finally invaded Attu, landed troops on Attu in 1943, it was May of 1943, Operation Land Crab took about 2.5 weeks. It ended when most of the Japanese were killed in a hand-to-hand combat at the end. When they realized they couldn't win, they launched a banzai attack, the first banzai attack Americans had ever seen. Hundreds of them died by blowing themselves up with hand grenades. So altogether, out of 2,800 or so Japanese, only 28 or 29 of them survived. They were either killed in action or they committed suicide. The casualty rate for the Americans was, depending on which website you read, it was either 549 or 550 died. Somewhere between 1,148 and 1,500 wounded in action, and between 1,200 and 1,814 were sick or died from disease because of the weather. Those were the National Park Service and Wikipedia. There's other sites, but all the numbers are fairly close to that, what I read. So after the forced evacuation of the Aleuts, they went to southeast Alaska, and even after the Battle of the Aleutian Islands was over, they still had to stay there until the end of the war. After the end of the war, the Attuans weren't allowed to, once they were repatriated back to the United States, they weren't allowed to go back to Attu, and the United States resettled them on Atka Island. And the other Aleuts found, when they returned home, that their villages had been burned. The Americans did that to deny the Japanese housing in case they had invaded any of the other islands. In 1988, a formal apology was issued to the Aleut people from the United States government, and the surviving, I think it was 450, 450 survivors were paid $12,000 apiece, and several $1 million were given to the communities for their churches and their community public service. One other thing about the Aleut people, between 881 or 885 of them were forcibly relocated. Out of that number, somewhere between 10% and 118, I've read. Somewhere between 10% and 100, or up to 118 of them died in the internment camps that they were put in for their safety. So that kind of wraps up the Aleutian Island battle, the Battle of the Aleutians. If you're interested in more information, there's a pretty good book called The 1,000-Mile War. It came out in 1969 by Brian Garfield. And there's other books too. One last thing. Dutch Harbor actually has a museum dedicated to World War II. And there's still a lot of stuff that remains, a lot of the bunkers and stuff. I'll post some pictures at the end of this video so you can look at them. And I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it and learned a little bit about the little-known Battle of the Aleutians. Thanks for watching.